Alrighty folks, howdy and welcome back to the channel. I do believe this is the official episode 2 of the M38 project, and as you just saw, the M38, she's in the shop here. We've got some auxiliary lighting shining down on this thing, and I thought first things first, I'd give you guys kind of a tour of this thing, show you all the parts that we're going to be working with before I dismantle this thing, because that's going to be pretty much the first thing that's going to happen. Is as you see this thing, it looks like a nice complete Jeep. Yeah, I'm taking it all apart. Of course, I'm not using this frame for this project. I'm putting the body here on the M38 frame that you guys saw in the last episode that I got all nice and painted up. And so yeah, I'm going to dismantle this thing. We're going to go through some of the parts. I'm going to use quite a few parts that are here, but not all the parts. It's a long story, but let's talk. So first things first that I want to grab off this thing are all of the leaf spring packs. As you can see, there's a sticker on that one. There's a sticker there. These are brand new from Alaska Spring out of Anchorage. Clearly this thing's got quite a bit of rust on it. I honestly don't know what the story is on this Jeep, the backstory. I know nothing at all other than it ended up in a storage unit. And it kind of looks like it sat in a swamp or an area with a lot of moisture, because it absolutely got ravaged by the elements. The rear axle was either rebuilt or gone through at some point on this Jeep, and what happened is they did not put any oil or any fluid in it, and the rear axle was seized up when I got this thing. I swapped in a parts axle, but that axle, the only thing it does right now is roll. The axle shafts are junk on it, that rear axle. I know nothing about this front axle. I should probably look into it, because they did put a lot of new parts on this Jeep. I know that I scavenged from that old axle that was no good and not rolling. I pulled like brake shoes and master cylinders off of that old rear axle to put in Eureka. And as far as I know, this front axle has all new brake hardware on it, which is great. Saved me some money. I already have some new hardware coming for the rear axle on this thing. So yeah, these axles won't get used. I don't believe I can use these wheels. These are a later style wheel. These would have been on the M151 Mutt, I believe. And they're actually a little more inset. As you can see, there's absolutely no clearance in there for steering. And this tub's not exactly centered on the frame, because this tub's not bolted down. But I mean, there's 2 fingers maybe that I can get in there between the tub and the wheel, which as soon as you start going off-road, these wheels are going to rub. So one of the first things I'm going to need to track down here is going to be a full set of actual Jeep wheels. And yeah, I might use this rubber on this Jeep later on. These are a really nice set of bias plies, but I'm not 100% sure yet. We'll figure that out as we go. The body that we're working with here, or at least the tub, is an original, I'm almost dead certain, 1952 Willys M38 tub. Dead giveaways of the M38 are the tool indents on the passenger side. No other Jeep, no other flat fender Jeep, and no other Jeep has ever had tool indents on the passenger side. So if you see one with tool indents on the passenger side, they're almost definitely an M38 Jeep, unless of course somebody kind of did something custom. I have seen it. It has happened, but typically that's a dead giveaway. The other dead giveaway is the glove box. World War II Jeeps had a glove box that was a little longer, but World War II Jeeps and M38s are the only 2 flat fender Jeeps that ever had the glove boxes. No other flat fenders did. And like I said, M38s had a smaller glove box, so that's a dead giveaway as well. And then another one is the instrument panel. There's actually a panel that fits in here. It's right there in the snow. Let me find my gloves and dig it out for you guys. Alrighty, here she is. Let me get the gloved hand so I don't get all cold. But as you can see, M38s are the only flat fender Jeeps that had this individual instrument panel. You can see there's the 4 fasteners on there. Those are just quarter turn fasteners. Then you can pop this instrument panel out. Of course, all the gauges would be in there if I had gauges. Kind of a cool thing about this panel here is you can read, if you can read it. I don't know if it'll focus, but it's stamped on there, AC Spark Plug Division, Flint, Michigan, USA, which is kind of a cool piece. Obviously, that's an original M38 piece. So yeah, the individual instrument panel, you can still see over there on the driver's side, that round hole. You can see the olive drab coming through there. Olive drab coming through there, so we can tell, obviously, it's a military Jeep. This would have been a hole for the headlight switch. M38s had kind of a weird headlight switch. They're really cool with a bunch of switches and levers and whatnot. Obviously that's missing. And M38s were the only flat fender Jeeps to have the parking brake on all the way on the outside of the driver's side. So there's some really interesting things happening on these that is just 100% different than any other flat fender Jeep. Like I said, the windshield frame was different on these Jeeps. They are almost identical to a CJ3A windshield frame, with the exception that they had this center vent blocked off. This one's not done right, but the original ones would have had two straps on either side to hold this vent in. I'm not 100% sure why they blocked the vent off, but they did. M38s had this giant fuel filler. They had, I think it was like a 4-inch fuel filler, so you could fill it with just about anything that you had. And they also had like the grab handle over that to protect the fuel filler cap. Of course, this Jeep has holes. I believe these are for top bows for the canvas fabric top to go over. Would have been those holes, but there are a ton of little holes drilled all over this Jeep for various footman loops and hooks and all kinds of stuff. And then moving to the back, one of the dead giveaways from the back that we have an M38, of course, is the tailgate, which does not say Willys on it. So this is exactly identical to every other CJ flat fender Jeep tailgate. Of course, like I said, they just don't have Willys stamped into them. As far as I've heard, all the stories that I've heard is that, of course, in World War II, Ford and Willys stamped Ford and Willys on the bottom driver's side of the back of the Jeep. World War II Jeeps had a flat back. They had no tailgate. And then Ford and Willys stamped their logos on the back of the tubs. And somewhere around late 1942, I believe, the government basically told them you cannot tramp stamp the Jeeps. They have to be plain. So Ford and Willys had to stop stamping them with their make. And I believe that's the same story with the tailgate, is they had to eradicate the Willys from the tailgate and just make it flat because the government didn't want, the brands plastered all over their vehicles. Another thing, inset taillights. I don't think that any CJs had the holes cut for the taillights. These aren't the correct taillights. The correct taillights would have been blackout taillights for an M38, but those will do for now. And yeah, I'm trying to remember any other particularities that aren't the frame. The frame has a bunch of differences on it, and there's some other, minor differences going on with these things, but the M38 overall is pretty unique for the flat fender Jeeps. It's definitely one of a kind among the rest of the flat fender Jeeps, which is why I was personally quite excited to get one, and that's actually why I've always wanted one and was surprised to end up with one. For my project, we're going to stray away from the completely, military correct aesthetic on this thing, but, I want to keep a lot of the cool features because I like a lot of the cool features. So, yeah, with all that said, there's you guys a great look at this thing as it sits. And for the, preliminary assembly of this Jeep, I think it's going to end up looking pretty much like this. I might find a better hood. Not a better hood. I really like this hood. It's got really nice patina and everything, but I would like to find one that's painted, matches the Jeep a little better. The rusted hood with the black body panels doesn't really look all that great, but, that's an issue for further on down the road. But there's a good look at the Jeep as it sits. I'm going to start disassembling this thing, which is going to go really quick because the whole front end of this Jeep is just held on with tie wire. You can see I've got the grill wired to the frame and the fenders wired in and the hood wired to the grill, and the fenders are all wired to the tub. There's absolutely nothing holding the front end on this Jeep. I just slapped all these panels on it to make it look like a Jeep, give me some good motivation. I did all that when I first got this thing, and then it sat like this all summer. So it was pretty motivational to see the thing looking complete, but now, of course, we've got to disassemble it, so I'm going to get to it. Alrighty, a few more thoughts that popped into my head while I was disassembling the front end here. One thing that I totally skipped my mind because I don't have it is this is not the correct M38 grill. The M38 grill is insanely diagnostic and stands out against all other flat fender Jeep grills because M38 grills do not have these chrome rings. They have what would have been color matched steel. They kind of look like rings around the headlights, and then they would have had two steel bars that go across at an angle. I think they go out like that, not in like that, but they just have a bar there and one that goes the opposite way on the other headlight, and that's how M38 grills look. And then they have hinges down here, so that all you'd have to do is take all of the bolts out, and then the grill would fold down. You could pop the rad out, take the engine straight out the front, super quick and easy. That's how the M38s were designed. But CJs obviously have these chrome rings, and then the bottoms of the grill are bolted on, as opposed to having the hinges, of course. And then World War II Jeeps, if you guys didn't know, World War II Jeeps have smaller headlights, slightly smaller, that sit behind the grill, because World War II Jeep headlights flip up so you can have like a working light to look at your engine. So there's some things about the M38 grill that are different. Obviously, this Jeep has lived an interesting life before I got it. So this grill and the fenders are off of a CJ. The grill obviously is CJ. And the fenders, as you can see, have that. That's almost, I want to say that's Willys Luzon red coming through. The grill, you can see in the turn signal. Oh, you can't see because that's way too bright. In the turn signal lenses here, you can see that color coming through. And then on the other fender, we've got the same Luzon red with the yellow and everything coming through. So the whole front end on this Jeep was something else that somebody found. Obviously, it's all painted to match this very same color as the Jeep. And then I do have the hood that was on this Jeep. It's the same exact color and everything, but it's got a big dorky scoop on it, and it's all fiberglassed and everything. So I will not be using that hood, even though it's the, color matched hood and everything. It just looks too ridiculous for me. So I'm pretty sure in this Jeep's life, it either had like a V8, a V6 swap, or it had a 134 F-head swap into it. And when you do the 134 F-head engines, of course, are the overhead valve Jeep engines, and when you put those in these Jeeps, typically guys put scoops on them because the carburetors are too tall and you need extra hood clearance for those engines. And that's why Willys made the CJ3B that have the taller hood, is to accommodate for that taller carburetor. But I do have a really good condition flathead to go in this Jeep, so I'll be running a stock hood and everything, and I am not putting the work into that other hood I have for this thing. So yeah, we'll figure it out down the line. But some more interesting facts about this Jeep that, like, as you can see, things have really been kind of changed around on this Jeep with the big hood scoop and everything. I really have no idea what people were doing with this thing in the past. And one thing that did pop into my mind is that I do have an error correct 1952 M100 trailer sitting here, and that should be almost identical to what the taillights on the M38 would have looked like. And those obviously would have been set into the pockets in the back of the Jeep. So yeah, there's a pretty decent overview of the M38, and if not all, definitely not all, but at least some of the peculiarities of these Jeeps. They're kind of unique for the flat fenders, which is really cool. So anyhow, I'm going to get back to it. Got to pop the windshield frame off here and get everything put in the tub, and then I'll clean up behind the Jeep, probably bring the service truck in here, and then pick the whole tub up and take it outside so it's out of the way. Alrighty, well, while I'm being an M38 Jeep encyclopedia, I might as well keep it going. One thing I totally forgot to mention, again, the only flat fenders to have these boxes. M38s are the only ones that had this, and these boxes are battery boxes. The reason being is M38 Jeeps were 24 volt. The US government specified that because they were running all of their equipment on 24 volt, or were turning to 24 volt, and so they wanted these Jeeps to be 24 volt as well. So Willys added the battery box here to put the battery in, and these Jeeps had a battery box over here in the on the frame. If you watch the frame video that I did here a couple weeks ago, you can see the battery tray, I guess, is there. And the battery tray would have had a box around it that usually those boxes get lost. But yeah, again, these are the only Jeeps that have these. I'm going to be running this thing 12 volts, so this box isn't going to be used for a battery, but I'll find something creative to do with it. down the line. And these are just held down with these little, again, just these little quarter turn fasteners. If that one will fasten. There we go. No, it'll be all right. And then one more thing, because I found it very fascinating, this Jeep still has some remnants of the original wiring, is that M38 Jeeps had a fully sealed waterproof electrical system. These things were designed for deep water fording, and so they had these little connectors on them that would have been, I do believe they would have been filled with grease, and then that, of course, would keep water out of those connections. So you can see we've still got an original dimmer switch on this thing, but it's had some other creative wiring. You can see the back of the aftermarket ignition switch there. These Jeeps wouldn't have had an ignition switch like this from the factory. These Jeeps would have been runnable without a key from the military. And one thing that I do want to find is, I think it was either a CJ3A starter. Yeah, I think it was a CJ3A starters are the ones that have a mechanical Bendix that you push with the foot rod. It's all covered in snow from the inside, but that's the rod that would have kicked out to engage the starter. And so that's one thing I kind of want to retain, is the mechanical starter. So of course you push that in and it hits a giant switch that spins the starter and simultaneously pushes the Bendix in. And then when you let off on that, of course it pulls the Bendix off and pulls electricity off of it. So the starter's no longer spinning. So some kind of cool stuff. Just, again, M38s are kind of a very unique Jeep, and there seems to be a lot up here in Alaska, but there's not a lot in general. They were only made 1950 to, I think, September 1952 is when they quit making these things. So yeah, there's not a lot of them out there, and they're kind of cool. So we'll get the tub off of this thing here shortly, and then I can start grabbing all the stuff I want off this frame, and then of course get all this stuff out of the way, and we can get the other frame is absolutely buried back there right now because I had to shuffle things around to get this sassy machine in here so I can do stuff with this, which probably isn't a great idea because I'm working on that, but I'm working on that, but I'm working on everything else. So some interesting times. Alrighty, how about that? A couple ratchet straps. I got the tub suspended, got it out from under the frame. Just got to drive her out, find a pallet to set this tub down on. It can sit out there until I'm ready to use the tub. You know, in an ideal world here in a couple weeks, in a realistic world here, probably when the snow starts melting, I'll dig the tub out, and maybe by then we'll be ready to throw the tub on the frame here. But again, you can just see those brand new leaf springs. That's what I'm after. Try and get some new performance out of the suspension on this thing once she's on the road. You can see that we've got some repairs to do here when the time comes. I think I'm going to try and repair all that before I use the tub first. The tub's going to go on the frame looking like this right now. I want to slap this thing together kind of as is. I want to wheel it around for a summer or two and really figure out all the odds and ends that I want on this Jeep. And then here, you know, in a couple years, I'll peel this thing all back apart, do everything up really nice and paint it and everything. And of course, by then I should have it figured out exactly what I'm after, you know, paint wise, whatever accessories I want to add on. I'll know, you know, I probably want to put all the footman loops back in for the canvas top, the top bow bracket that would go there and everything. So I'll figure out all the holes that need to be drilled in this tub so I'm not drilling into nice new paint or anything bad. And yeah, and of course, I kind of just want to slap this thing together and enjoy it. It goes against everything that I have said up until this point because I've really wanted to do this thing up 100% right. But I think to do it right, I'm just going to have to put it together and use it first, figure out what all I need, and then a little later on down the line, peel it all back apart, and then I can beautify the tub and everything, all the odds and ends and parts and everything. So yeah, this is probably the last time you guys are going to see this tub for a hot minute. It'll be sitting out here in the backyard. Handy thing about these tailgate handles or tailgate chains here is wrap it around the pole there. That keeps the tub from twisting. Always something to figure out. Alrighty, there she is. We got her all stripped down. So this front axle looks to be in pretty good shape. I pulled the drain plug and shined a flashlight in there, and there's no rust up in this, which is good. And I don't think anybody bothered to replace all the seals, but like I said, it should have all new brake hardware. Obviously, everything on this front axle really isn't assembled as it should be, so I'm going to need to double check everything, but I think I'm just going to go ahead and use this front axle because everything looks to be good on it. Even the whole steering assembly looks to be pretty decent on here, not all worn out like every other one. One thing is that these U-bolts aren't really tight. They skipped a few steps in the old torque procedure on those. If I can get this cross member stood up over here, set stuff out of the way. Get this thing stood up. There you can see whatever happened with this Jeep, they really just slapped it together and threw it in the storage unit. So we'll have to go through everything again, but like I said, I think I'm going to use this front axle, but I can't use this rear axle. I'm going to have to use the other M-38 rear axle the M-38 axle that was attached to that frame when I brought it in here. This axle, the reason why I can't use it, you can see the drum moving separate from the backing plate. Now, I'm not going to pull it apart and show you, but I've had this drum off of here before, and somebody took an angle grinder to the tapered axle shaft. So the axle shafts in this axle are junk. It rolls nice and seems to work fine, but yeah. So the axle shafts are junk. I could put other axle shafts in it. I'm not going to put all the time into this axle. I'm going to put it into the actual M-38 axle. But like I said, I did want those new leaf springs, so we got those. This frame's ready to find its way back outside now. You can see it's still a somewhat usable frame, but every single body mounting point is all rust jacked, and like this one's rusted clear through. The pintle hitch has pretty bad rust on it. Just this whole frame is pretty pitted and rough. So I might save it and use it in the future, but for right now, she's going to go back out in the boonies. We've got that M-38 frame we went through. I did grab the transmission cross member though. Ooh, about to drop the camera. This transmission cross member is in really nice shape. You can see obviously it's not all dinged up and everything. It's not all bent out of shape. So I'm going to go ahead, obviously wire wheel this, I'll paint it, and then we'll slap it on the frame there. Get new rubber mounts for it and everything. And that'll be looking good as new. We got our axles here. Well, axle here. The other axle I was taking apart here the other day. But we got our leaf springs, we got axles, we've got all the suspension components. I just need to condense everything, get this frame out of the way, clean up a little bit, and yeah, you guys can look forward to hopefully suspension assembly in the very next video, now that we got the old M-38 all taken apart. So yeah, that's about all I've got for today. Like I said, I got to clean everything up, get everything out of here, out of the way. And well, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. Hopefully you guys keep enjoying the project here. We'll catch you guys on the next one.